About 2 months ago, I posted a video showing my 8-week progress after following a pretty strict strength program. My goals were simply consistency and adherence to the program I wrote for myself and to get some numbers up on my lifts. And today, we're doing it again. Like I said in the last video, I am going on a 3-week vacation. Literally next week. So I only had 6 weeks for this specific training block. I still made some really great progress, so I want to share it with you. Let's break down my split first. Over the past 6 weeks, I kept the same split: push, pull, and skills. But I actually added a day here or there, and it was basically a second skills day. We'll talk more about what that entails, but let's start at the beginning of the week, which is the pull day. A pull day is a full body day focused on the pulling muscles of the body. It's going to be mostly posterior chains, so think glutes, hamstrings, and back. Here's my workout from my previous block of training, and here's my workout from my current block of training. I used pretty much the exact same formula, so let's break down what I changed and why. You can see I actually kept the deadlift. I talked about this last time, but I felt like I was finally getting somewhere. This was really the first time I was like super consistent with my trap bar deadlift. A lot of that was just figuring out the right time to go to the gym, to be honest. My gym only has 2 lifting platforms. I just prefer being on one, so I feel like I'm out of the way. So luckily it was always available when I was going. This was my big lift of the day, so I left it by itself. And let's talk about the numbers. So on week 1, I was at 4 sets of 8 at 155 pounds. Now, as the weeks went on, I started to play with just like finding where my strength could go. And by the 6th week, I did end up getting up to 185 pounds, so I added 30 pounds onto my deadlift. Now, that 185 pounds was not being done for like a ton of reps, but I was able to do that for 3 reps every time I tried it. Let's move into our superset. So you can see in the last training block that I was working on single leg deadlifts, and I switched that into a kickstand deadlift. I typically like to move into like a unilateral variation of my big lift, so some type of deadlift. That way I'm working on that single leg strength, which is going to recruit a lot more of the stability or stabilizing muscles. Now, I decided to go for a kickstand deadlift because I wanted to load up a little bit more weight, and to do that, you're gonna need more stability. So placing that foot on the floor is always a good option. So in week 1, I started at 3 sets of 10 with 30s, and by the end of this, I did 3 sets of 8 with 40s. So I did add 20 pounds onto my kickstand deadlift. So that's the first half of the superset. You can see last time I was going into a lat pullover, which I talked about being like kind of a lighter accessory lift because I was still nursing my shoulder injury, but by the end of those 8 weeks, my shoulder was perfectly fine, so I really wanted to load something up a little bit more. I opted for a bent over row. I'm gonna tell you right now, I kind of alternated between like the loaded straight bar, and then sometimes I ended up doing a single arm bent over row. Honestly, it came down to what I felt like doing that day. So on week 1, I started at 3 sets of 10 with 50 pounds, and by week 6, I was doing 3 sets of 6 with 70 pounds. So I added 20 pounds onto my bent over row. Even though my grip changed between overhand versus neutral, I always made sure, even if I was being kind of lazy and just wanted to grab a dumbbell instead, I was doing half of whatever the straight bar was. Does that make sense? Like I was trying to keep the weight accurate, consistent. Let's move on. All right, so now I'm heading over to the machine. So last training block, I was working on seated rows. Now I'm working on a lat pull down. So again, we're still keeping both horizontal and vertical pulling movements. We're just switching whether it's being done with free weights or whether it's being done at a cable machine. This is just a really good example of like keeping the same training patterns, but varying how you're doing it. This is gonna help prevent overuse, and it's gonna help you just continue to progress over time and get stronger. So in week 1, I started at 4 sets of 10 with 60 pounds. And on week 6, I had kind of a plethora of reps that I was doing, but I did work my way up to 70 pounds. So I added 10 pounds onto this, which I'm really proud about, simply because on week 1, I was really nervous about my shoulder just being in that open position, and I felt really good by the end of 6 weeks. Finally, we have one more accessory exercise. So last training block, I was going upstairs and I was sitting on a hamstring curl machine or doing the prone hamstring curl. And this time I actually switched it up and I started doing some single leg calf raises. I have literally never isolated my calves in terms of strength work in my life, and I wanted to try it. Not everything needs to be super like optimal and strategic. I just was like, oh, this is something I've neglected. Let's try it. And it was fun. So I started week 1 at 3 sets of 12 with 18 pounds on one side, like on the loaded side. And then by the end of 6 weeks, I was doing 3 sets of 10 with 30 pounds on one side. So I added 12 pounds onto this lift. Let's move into our push day. Push day is a full body day focused on the pushing muscles of the body. This is going to be more so anterior chain. So think quads. We can make a case for the glutes as well, chest, shoulders, and triceps. Here's my workout from my previous training block, and here's my workout from my current training block. You can see last time that I started started a big lift with the chest press, and I did nothing with that this time. I just ended up omitting a big lift for this workout, and instead I started with a superset because I wanted to work on a little bit more accessory work this time around. So jumping to the superset, you can see that I swapped out Bulgarians for front foot elevated reverse lunges. I actually love both of these exercises so much. They're absolutely brutal, but like the masochist in me, I don't know. I love a split squat. I love a reverse lunge. So this is a unilateral knee dominant exercise. And the way that I'm performing them targets a lot of glute, but we're also getting a good chunk of knee flexion and extension. So we're also hitting the quads. On week 1, I started at 3 sets of 10 with 20s. And by week 6, I was doing 3 sets of 8 with 30s. So I did add 20 pounds onto this. I kept pretty much the same deficit each time, even though I think I did my push day in 3 different gyms. But for the most part, I was always trying to utilize like the height of a stepper. So last training block, I trained my unilateral knee dominant exercise. Sorry, I just sounded so like douchey. I paired that with a single arm overhead press, which was very fun to work on. But now that my shoulder is feeling better, I really wanted to cycle back in push-ups. So I went from a vertical push to a horizontal push. Now, even though this is a body weight exercise, and sometimes people would be like, well, why are you wasting so much energy at the beginning of your workout on this body weight exercise? It's because it's a very important skill to me. So I really wanted to just make sure I could continue to do 3 sets of 10 push-ups, because body weight drills like that and pull-ups, if it is that old saying, like if you don't use it, you will lose it. I started on week 1 with 3 sets of 10, so I apparently still had that. And I did that for 2 more weeks. And then I was like, how can I progress this more? A deficit. So by working through a deficit, you're going to get a lot more range of motion through your shoulder extension, which means you're going to get a bigger stretch on your chest. And I worked my way up to 3 sets of 10 with yoga blocks as a deficit. And those were like chunky yoga blocks too. I think out of everything, this is probably the lift that I'm the most proud of. It's just cool looking. It's like a fun party trick. I'm really impressed with myself and the strength that I've built up with them. And I'm really happy that my shoulder feels better. Celebrate your wins, everybody. So then I went into like this upper body superset, which I guess we can say took the place of the chest pressing from last block. So I was doing tricep like push downs and then this like external rotation into an abduction. Honestly, I just wanted to play with the cable machine. I've also talked about in a few different mobility videos that I'm really weak in external rotation from my shoulder. So I was hoping to strengthen that. We'll talk about that in a second. Let's start with the tricep extensions or push downs, whatever we want to call them. So I started at 3 sets of 10 at 15 pounds, and I worked my way up to 3 sets of 10 with 20 pounds. So I added 5 pounds onto this. The triceps are a fairly small muscle, so it makes sense that like you're not going to have this wild gain here. Also keeping in mind, I did a shit ton of push-ups right before this, which is also going to incorporate the tricep because tricep is in charge of elbow extension. So my triceps were fatigued. So this was, again, very just like accessory for fun, playing around. I think that if I did not do the push-ups before this, I would have had more gains and more strength, but again, it wasn't as important to me. Let's talk about the external rotations. I'm just too weak to use the cable machine. Week 1, I did 3 sets of 3 very shitty reps at 10 pounds because that was the lowest weight on the cable machine I had access to. Then I went up to 3 sets of 8 really shitty reps at 5 pounds. And then I went down to 3 sets of 5 kind of okay reps at 5 pounds. So we're just calling this a loss, and I shouldn't be doing this exercise right now. We got to use a band. We got to build up that strength. And again, does everyone need to do this exercise, like these rotator cuff type of drills? Absolutely not. I just know from going to physical therapy with a shoulder issue that this is a weak spot for me. All right, and then we have the leg press. So I actually didn't get to work on this much. So I stuck with this guy because, again, kind of like the deadlift, I was like, oh, I really just want to like get some numbers up here. I need a little bit more time with it. Unfortunately, I mean, it's fine. I didn't get to work on it too much simply because I started utilizing different gyms that I train out of just for convenience in my day, but not all of them have a leg press machine. So instead, sometimes I would do the seated knee extension. Is that what it's called? The one that targets your quads, since this is a push day. And with that, I basically did like 4 sets of 12 at 40 pounds. That's it. Let's talk about the skills days. So like I said, I ended up with 1 to 2 skills days per week, depending on my schedule. Honestly, I only had an extra day added in here because Kevin walks to Orange Theory on Saturdays and my gym is right near it. So I would drop him off, do my workout, and then pick him up. The exercises kind of varied session to session, also depending on how many I was going to be doing during the week. But let's just kind of talk about like the main exercises that I worked on. So my first skills day was typically kettlebell work. So I was working on Turkish get-ups, I was working on snatches, and I was working on kind of like complexes, stringing a few exercises together. Then on my second skills day, I would work on pull-ups, sprints, accessory work like lateral raises, chest flies, rear delt flies, just stuff that I hadn't seen at all during the week, and then mobility. Typically, I got a lot of mobility stuff done because everything else I was working on didn't take a ton of time, but I had to kill some time until Kevin was done with his workout. So I actually made some really fun mobility gains this month. Let's talk about some of my favorite progress that I made over these 6 weeks. Pull-ups, I can do 3 in a row now, which has never happened. I made a whole video about pull-ups and like how I got my first one, which some people are gonna be like, it's a chin-up, it's not a pull-up. I don't give a shit. I can pull my body up over a bar. If you're gonna be that pedantic about it, this is not the channel for you. So I did that video, I got 1 pull-up, and then I went, bye, I'm never doing these again. One of my goals for this year, I think I said it in my 2024 goals video, was to get 3 pull-ups in a row by the end of the year. It's April 16th when I'm filming this, everybody. We did it. The next exercise that I had a fun PR with was my Turkish get-ups. 35 pounds, which is slightly terrifying, especially without a spot. It was very fun. I was happy that I could keep form. Yeah. And then finally, I wouldn't say that these are like perfect by any means, but my snatches are getting a lot cleaner in terms of resisting the urge to cast out. So I'm keeping the bell tighter. I'm doing more of a squatty hinge. And I mean, these are just going to take a lot of reps over time, which leads me into what am I doing in my next training block? So like I said, we're going on vacation. I mean, by the time you see this, I'll be back. So if you want to ask me how it is, drop it in the comments. But we're going on a 3-week vacation. When we're on vacation, we have a little ritual, like we'll get up, we'll go to the gym, and then we'll get on with our day. When we get back, I'm gonna be starting a kettlebell program. I don't wanna talk about who it's with yet, but I will definitely make a video talking about it. I basically don't wanna talk about it until I've tried it for a bit. And the main reason why I want to dive into someone else's programming is because I think it's really, really important to learn from other people who know more than you. And B, one of my big goals this year is to get better at kettlebell work. Doing 1 session a week of kettlebell skill work is just not enough to really progress. You're really just gonna maintain the skills that you already have. So I'm really excited to not only learn more, but also get better. I've had a lot of questions from Fit Club members or people maybe who have tried my programs before, and I get a lot of requests for more kettlebell programs. I cannot give more programs than I have, which is 1, and it's like a very basic, like here's how you do a dead clean and a dead snatch. That whole program is the stuff that I've mastered and feel comfortable coaching people through. I am not comfortable putting out a program until I have absolutely nailed my own skills. I think you need to nail it yourself before you coach it. That's my opinion. So that's what I've been doing. That's what's next. And I'm excited to keep sharing it with you. If you have any questions at all or just want to share a little bit about what your training block looks like right now, please leave it down below. Make sure you hit that subscribe button so you don't miss out. And I will see you all, I guess, when we do another one of these. Bye.